Maria adjusted the simple pearl earring she had borrowed from her sister, taking a deep breath before stepping through the glass doors of the sleek corporate building. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and gleaming chrome accents, the kind of place where confidence was currency and appearances spoke louder than words. Dressed in a plain navy dress and comfortable flats, Maria felt every bit the outsider compared to the well-dressed candidates chatting in hushed tones near the entrance. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her worn leather portfolio. This interview wasn't just another step, it was a chance to prove herself, to break into a world that often seemed reserved for those who fit a certain mold. Mr. Collins sat behind a large desk in the interview room, his eyes sharp beneath his perfectly groomed eyebrows. He was known among the staff for his polished demeanor and an unforgiving approach to first impressions. His tailored suit and wicked smile did little to soften the air of superiority he carried with every word. As Maria was led quietly into the room, she caught a glimpse of his smirk, already sizing her up before a single question was asked. He glanced over her resume but mostly seemed focused on her plain attire and unassuming presence. "Maria, it's unusual to see someone dressed so simply at this level," he said, a tone dripping with thinly veiled disdain. He folded his hands and leaned back, eyes narrowing as if he had already made up his mind. "Tell me, why do you think you belong here among these candidates?" Maria opened her mouth to answer, hope mingling with anxiety, but Mr. Collins's expression tightened. It was clear he was ready to shut the meeting down before it began. The hint of a challenge hung palpably in the air as the walls of judgment closed in around her. Maria's voice faltered for a moment, but she quickly gathered herself and said, "Because I have the skills and experience required for this position. I've worked in administration for over 10 years, managing complex projects and leading teams successfully." Mr. Collins let out a short, dismissive laugh, shaking his head as if to clear a ridiculous idea from his mind. "Experience, you say?" He glanced around the room as if expecting to find someone to back his unspoken thoughts. "Your resume is service-oriented, yes, but this company demands more. We expect our hires to embody a certain level of sophistication, polish, and confidence. Frankly, your appearance doesn't suggest you fit into our corporate culture." A faint murmur arose from the staff seated in the adjoining lounge where a few employees were quietly observing the interviews. Some exchanged glances, while others smirked faintly, their amusement barely concealed. Maria's cheeks flushed hot, not only from the sting of Collins's words but from the undercurrent of disapproval rippling through the room. "I believe capability matters more than appearances," Maria said steadily, trying to maintain her composure despite the growing knot of humiliation. "I'm confident I can contribute meaningfully here." Mr. Collins's smile was ice cold. "Confidence?" He tapped a manicured finger against the wooden desk. "Confidence without presentation makes little impression. We live in a world where presentation opens doors. You should know that. But perhaps I misjudged." He leaned forward, lowering his voice theatrically. "Tell me, Maria, how do you expect to keep up in this environment dressed as you are? One might say you're almost deliberately underdressed." "Underdressed?" The word stung like a slap. Maria's hands clenched in her lap, but her voice remained calm, refusing to rise beyond a quiet steadiness. "I prefer to dress modestly. That choice doesn't diminish my qualifications or work ethic." "Modestly?" Mr. Collins smirked again, clearly enjoying this. "You do realize that modesty is often a polite word for plainness in this industry? And plainness tends to draw attention for all the wrong reasons. This is a high-profile role in a very visual company, Maria. You may want to consider whether you truly belong here before wasting more of everyone's time." A shocked silence fell over the room. Maria's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might betray her embarrassment. She glanced sideways toward the lounge where several staff members were now whispering, their expressions a mixture of schadenfreude and disbelief. One young woman chuckled softly into her phone, and another exchanged a look with her colleague, both barely suppressing their laughter. Maria swallowed hard. I assure you that my work speaks for itself. Work? Mr. Collins interrupted sharply, clearly savoring the moment. If that were true, you wouldn't need to sell yourself with platitudes like that. We need someone who can represent the company with both skills and style. His voice raised just enough to catch the ears of others nearby, inviting the room's occupants into the unfolding spectacle. Hands tighter around her portfolio, Maria felt an oppressive weight pressing against her chest. She hadn't expected the interview to unravel so quickly. Her stomach churned as the unconscious cruelty of Mr. Collins's words dug deeper, twisting her optimism into doubt. Yet she refused to flee. I won't change who I am to fit someone else's shallow definition of suitability, she said softly. If that means I'm not the right candidate for your company, then so be it. That expression on Mr. Collins's face twisted like a predator sensing a wounded prey's defiance. Very well. I think we've wasted enough time. His eyes darted to a security guard lingering just outside the door like a silent sentinel. Please escort Ms. Maria out of the building. We don't allow disruptions here. Maria stiffened. Excuse me, but I came here for a fair interview. Fair? Mr. Collins echoed, sounding incredulous. You're out of place here. Nothing more. The security guard nodded and stepped inside, positioning himself between Maria and the exit. Maria's breaths came faster now as the room's attention sharpened toward her. The whispers grew louder. Someone let out a stifled snicker. Eyes bored into her as though dissecting every inch of her character, judging and condemning in a quiet, collective verdict. She stood slowly, clutching her resume and portfolio as if they might shield her from the sting of humiliation. Please, she murmured, I have the right to be here. The guard's expression was impassive. I'm sorry, ma'am, but these are the instructions. Maria glanced around desperately, searching for an ally, for some flicker of kindness among the polished facade surrounding her. But only cold curiosity met her gaze. A nearby receptionist looked away, pretending not to notice. The young woman who had laughed now studied her phone with feigned interest. Her voice barely audible, Maria said, "This isn't fair." Fair? Mr. Collins said again, rising to his full height. Life is rarely fair, Maria. She hesitated at the doorway, every eye trained on her retreating back. With a heavy heart, she stepped into the lobby. The hum of whispered judgment followed her like a persistent shadow. As she passed through the lobby, she caught a few cracked smiles and overheard fragmented comments. Poor girl, shouldn't have bothered, not one of us. Outside, the cold air hit her face, sharp and cleansing all at once. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the familiar fabric a small comfort against the wave of shame rising inside her chest. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes but blinked them away fiercely. This wasn't how her story would end. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her friend Lena. Without hesitation, Maria tapped the screen and pressed the call button. The hopeful smile she mustered faded quickly as she realized the words to explain this moment wouldn't come easily. Lena, she whispered once her friend answered, voice cracking. I didn't get the job. She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence. Maria, what happened? Lena's voice was steady and warm, a lifeline through the storm of humiliation. Maria took a slow breath. They said I don't belong there because of how I look. They told me to leave. There was a long pause. That's awful. You don't deserve that. You're brilliant. Don't let them make you think otherwise. I'm trying not to, Maria said softly. But it hurts so much, Lena. So many eyes watching, judging. Maybe you don't need their approval. Maybe you just need to keep proving them wrong. Maria nodded despite the distance between them. She pocketed her phone with newfound resolve. She wasn't about to let Mr. Collins or the rest of the company define her worth. Just as she turned to leave the area, a voice called out behind her. Wait. She froze and turned to see a tall man walking toward the building's entrance. He exuded quiet authority, calm composure replacing the tension that clung to Maria's shoulders. The crowd that had dispersed in whispers now watched attentively as he approached Mr. Collins, who straightened immediately, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. The man's eyes locked on Maria. Is this the woman I've heard causing a stir? Maria looked from the man to Mr. Collins, confusion knitting her brow. Sir, Mr. Collins said, voice tight, this candidate was out of line, causing unnecessary disturbance. We thought it best she be removed. The newcomer's gaze turned thoughtful as he surveyed Maria, then fixed it on Mr. Collins, who swallowed hard under his scrutiny. Maria's heart pounded. Something had shifted in the air. The whispering crowd leaned forward as if collective breath was being held. The man finally spoke, his tone carrying unmistakable weight. Maria, come with me. We'll talk. And with that simple invitation, doors closed behind Maria's past humiliation but opened wide toward an unexpected truth yet to be revealed. Maria hesitated for a moment, the weight of countless eyes pressing down on her from every direction. Her heart pounded, partly from the lingering sting of humiliation, partly from a sudden, unexpected surge of hope. The man walking toward her exuded calm authority, a presence that sliced through the tension like a blade. He had only said, Maria, come with me, but that simple phrase transformed the entire mood. As she followed him through the lobby, whispers morphed into stunned silence. People paused, uncertain, their earlier smirks replaced with wide eyes. Maria glimpsed Mr. Collins's rigid posture, his glossy facade fracturing beneath the strain. There was something familiar about the newcomer, some unspoken power that unsettled the room. They entered a spacious conference room, the sunlight filtering in through floor-to-ceiling windows, glossing the sleek wooden table. The man gestured for Maria to take a seat. He himself settled confidently, folding his hands on the table. I'm David, he said simply, the kind of introduction that needed no last name. Maria's pulse quickened, the CEO. She had never expected to meet him this way. David regarded her with steady eyes. Tell me, Maria, why do you think you're suited for this role? Maria swallowed hard and smiled, despite everything. Because I've spent over a decade leading project teams, managing communications, and navigating complex problems. I work hard, I listen, and I don't give up. David nodded approvingly. Good. Thank you for coming today despite the treatment you received. She hesitated. It was unexpected, but I still wanted to be here, to be heard. David studied her silently, then stood and moved to the whiteboard that dominated one wall. Turning, he wrote a complex equation and a series of company metrics, clear and detailed. Help me analyze this, he said, eyes locking with hers. Maria rose, nerves mingling with determination. She stepped forward and took the marker, her fingers steady. As she spoke, explaining the calculations, projections, and assumptions, her confidence grew. She pointed out patterns, suggested efficiency improvements, and linked the numbers to strategic goals, her voice calm but firm. A murmur of surprise echoed faintly through the glass walls. The colleagues lingering outside peeked in, eyebrows raised, their earlier judgments dissolving. David smiled broadly. Impressive. You've grasped the core challenges, more than most candidates I interview. Now, what adjustments would you propose? Maria thought rapidly, recalling details gleaned during her extensive career. I would recommend reallocating resources within Project Alpha to focus on data analytics, which can highlight customer trends more accurately. Also, improving cross-department communication channels will streamline workflow. As she spoke, her hands moved expressively, punctuating her points. It was a transformation from the tentative woman who had first entered the building, now commanding the room with insight and clarity. Behind the glass, Mr. Collins watched, his face drained of color. He mouthed words silently, a futile attempt to explain away his earlier assumptions. One of the senior staff approached the conference door cautiously. "Mr. Collins," he began. David turned, his expression firm. "Mr. Collins is excused. This meeting is now between the candidate and me." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her, knowing this time she was being judged fairly, solely on merit. After a thorough discussion, David nodded thoughtfully. "Maria, I'm genuinely impressed. You've exceeded expectations." Her skin tingled with disbelief. "Thank you. I only wish the experience had begun differently." David chuckled softly. "Sometimes, the surface can be deceiving. Today teaches a valuable lesson, to never underestimate what lies beneath." They spoke quietly a moment longer, then David made a phone call. When he finished, he turned to Maria with a knowing smile. "Would you consider joining our team, in a role that fully leverages your skills?" Maria's eyes brightened, disbelief giving way to gratitude. "I would be honored." Word spread swiftly through the building. Staff who had been dismissive earlier approached Maria, offering apologies and admiration. The atmosphere shifted palpably from condescension to respect. Later, in a company-wide meeting, David addressed the staff. "Let Maria's experience be a reminder, judging by appearances alone blinds us to real talent. Moving forward, let respect and open-mindedness guide us, not prejudice." Maria's transformation was complete. No longer the woman dismissed at the door, she had claimed her place through knowledge and dignity. The rumbling laughter that had once echoed in the halls was replaced with acknowledgments of her strength. The company had learned a lesson, and Maria had changed its course. When the dust settled, all eyes no longer bore down on her with scorn, but with recognition, and maybe, for some, a hint of admiration. In the days following the unexpected interview, Maria found herself the focus of company-wide conversations and curious inquiries. Yet, amidst the newfound attention, a quiet moment arrived when she was alone in the executive lounge, sipping a modest cup of tea and reflecting on all that had transpired. The sunlight streamed softly through the windows, warming her face but doing little to chase away the complexity of her thoughts. She was, after all, quite accustomed to the kind of assumptions and misunderstandings that now buzzed through this corporate hive. Few outside the inner circle knew the full story behind the simple woman who had walked into the towering glass building, the daughter of a rural schoolteacher and a factory worker, raised in a humble neighborhood where hard work was a currency far more valuable than appearances. Maria's life had never been about show or superficial elegance. For years, she had traveled abroad, dedicating herself to volunteer programs focused on education and community development, efforts that had left her little time or appetite for the trappings of wealth or status. Wearing comfortable clothes allowed her to blend into varied communities without drawing unwanted attention or disrupting the environments she served. Her husband's identity, the company's CEO, had been deliberately kept private during these travels, an unspoken boundary that kept her grounded and connected to the people she worked alongside, rather than the gilded towers she might otherwise have inhabited. Today, she chose simplicity not out of necessity but conviction, a reflection of values that transcended material trappings. Yet in this highly polished corporate world, such authenticity was often read as something else entirely: ignorance, lack, or even inadequacy. Maria remembered the moment she first met David, years earlier, back when their paths crossed during a charity gala. His sharp mind and calm demeanor had intrigued her, but it was his humility and quiet respect for the less visible parts of the world that drew her in. Their courtship had been a blend of two very different lives intersecting: a billionaire with a hunger to impact beyond profit margins, and a woman who spoke fluent compassion and dedication. The day she returned from months abroad volunteering, Maria had chosen her modest attire deliberately. It was not a fashion statement, but a quiet reminder to herself that the core of who she was did not need sparkling dresses or designer shoes to shine. The modest dress she wore to the interview was simply a continuation of that mindset. Her simplicity had fooled Mr. Collins, not because she lacked intelligence or ability, but because he saw through a lens clouded with stereotypes. His mistake was judging the packaging rather than the content. Breaking into a world defined by appearance wasn't easy, and Maria's journey was a gentle rebuke to its superficiality. She was a reminder that intellect and character are not cloaked in silk and sequins. Colleagues began to approach her with more genuine curiosity, asking about her experiences, her ideas, and her vision beyond the corporate norms. Maria welcomed the dialogue with warmth and openness, eager to bridge the world she straddled with grace. Her story reminded the company that authenticity could coexist with ambition, humility with leadership. Over time, she carved a role not just as the CEO's wife but as an independent presence, her voice steady and insightful within boardrooms and strategy sessions. She advocated for greater inclusion, for leadership that valued substance over surface. She inspired policies supportive of volunteering and employee contributions outside day-to-day work, reflecting her own passions. The contrasts of Maria's existence, the modest exterior and a life intertwined with power and influence, created a quiet ripple through the company's culture. People found themselves reflecting on their own assumptions and reconsidering what success truly meant. Yet Maria remained grounded. Despite the spotlight, she continued to dress simply, to speak thoughtfully and listen intently. The journey had taught her that true strength lay in authenticity and the refusal to be defined by others' shallow standards. And so, the woman who had once been ushered out with barely concealed disdain now held a position of respect, not simply for who she was married to, but for who she was in her own right. As Maria prepared to step into an influential role within the company, she felt a mixture of gratitude and a quiet determination. Her past, her values, and her vision had converged to bring her here, not by chance, but by steadfastness. In the corridors where she once felt invisible, doors now opened with a different warmth. There was anticipation among colleagues and executives alike, curious to see how she would shape this chapter. Maria smiled thoughtfully, aware that while much had changed, the true work was only beginning. There were new challenges ahead, roles to fill, and voices to elevate. And yet, beneath it all, she knew something vital, that being simple in appearance had never been a weakness. It had been her quiet strength all along. The aftermath of the interview unfolded rapidly within the company's upper echelons. David, the CEO, was not a man to let such a misstep go unaddressed. Within hours, Mr. Collins received a summons to the executive office, his confident facade already cracking under the weight of impending accountability. When Collins entered the spacious office, he found David standing by the window, his expression both steady and resolute. "Mr. Collins," David began, his voice calm but firm, "I have been reviewing the events surrounding the candidate Maria's interview." Collins shifted uneasily. "Sir, I was just ensuring the integrity of our hiring process." David turned to face him fully, eyes narrowing slightly. "By dismissing a qualified candidate because of her appearance? By ordering security to escort her out without due cause? That behavior is neither integrity nor professionalism. It reflects poorly on you and the company." Collins's mouth opened, but no words came. His mind raced, recalling the sharp gaze of Maria, the unexpected knowledge she displayed, and the CEO's pointed questions that laid bare his own prejudices. "I am placing you on probation," David continued. "You will also issue a formal apology to Maria and attend sensitivity and leadership training. Our company culture cannot tolerate baseless judgments or discrimination." The room was thick with tension, but Collins managed a strained nod. Pride bruised, yet recognition settling in, he had been outmaneuvered not just by Maria's talent, but by his own narrow-mindedness. Word of Collins's reprimand spread quietly but unmistakably. Staff who had once mocked Maria now whispered not only their apologies but their respect. Some stopped her in the halls, genuinely curious about her experiences, eager to listen rather than judge. One afternoon, David arranged a private meeting between Maria and Collins. The conference room's heavy doors closed behind them, the air charged with anticipation. Maria sat with quiet dignity, Collins shifting nervously across from her. "I owe you an apology," Collins began, voice low and unsteady. I judged you unfairly and acted inappropriately. You handled it with a grace I did not deserve. Maria looked at him steadily. Thank you for saying that. I believe growth comes from moments like this. I hope we can work together respectfully moving forward. Collins nodded, a small relief settling in his features. The exchange, though brief, marked the start of a new chapter, not just for Collins, but for them both. In the weeks that followed, Maria was offered a meaningful role within the company, heading a new initiative focusing on community engagement and corporate social responsibility. The position drew on her years of volunteer experience and her natural ability to connect with people. Her acceptance was met with a mixture of admiration and sincere congratulations. The company's culture began to shift, slowly but surely, toward one that valued substance and authenticity over style and superficialities. Maria approached her new role with enthusiasm, her ideas flowing freely and meeting with open minds. She organized employee volunteering programs, advocated for transparent communication, and helped establish mentorship opportunities for staff whose voices had been overshadowed. Her collaboration with David strengthened as well, their partnership rooted in mutual respect and a shared vision for a more inclusive, purposeful company. The ripples from this transformation extended beyond the office walls. Local nonprofits welcomed new resources and energy, while employees found renewed pride in their work and workplace. Maria's vindication felt complete, not as a personal triumph over injustice but as a meaningful turning point that challenged stigmas and opened doors for others. Reflecting on the journey, Maria often thought about the initial interview, the sting of rejection, and the overwhelming scrutiny she had endured. Those moments of doubt and pain had been crucibles forging her resilience and resolve. Her story became a quiet inspiration within the company and beyond, a reminder that true worth is not measured by outward appearances but by character, knowledge, and determination. And as the seasons turned, Maria found herself more at peace with the intersection of her simple appearance and extraordinary life. They were not contradictions but parts of a whole, a testament to the power of being unapologetically oneself. As this chapter drew to a close, Maria's eyes held a steady light, inviting others to see past surface judgments and discover the richness that lies beneath. What would you have done if you were in Maria's shoes? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in our next story.